Good day. My name for broadcast purposes is Grandpa 1940, and today we welcome Roberta Blackman Woods, constituency MP for Durham City. Roberta, you stated in Parliament last year the government proposed a new method for calculating the housing need for local authorities areas, but unfortunately the new formula does not take into account the amount of land that is protected in a given area. Are you asking for or promoting a withdrawal from greenbelt land set by statute in Durham or everywhere else? Cool.
No, the point I was making is that it was going to be really difficult for some local authority areas to get a 5-year land supply because the government hadn't really taken that into account. Labour's policy has remained remarkably consistent about the green belt. We think it's an issue for local councils and they need to consult with their local communities if they want to put land in or take land out of the green belt. It should be done through the local plan process.
Okay. Roberta, in the light of the debacle over the Independent Parole Board's decision to free a multiple rapist after only 8 odd years in prison, would you have a view on whether the Home Office should have maybe been given the equivalent of a golden share when it comes to the release of dangerous prisoners on licensed parole?
I think the War Boys case has thrown up real issues with our parole system, and I think it's right that the whole decision-making process is subject to judicial review. My opinion is that lessons need to be learned from that case, and certainly I think what worries a lot of people that I've talked to is that there were lots and lots and lots of incidents that he wasn't actually tried for. And I think so in addition to the parole issue, I also have a whole range of concerns about why we're not now trying him for those crimes that he wasn't convicted for in the first place.
Roberta, the official position of the Parliamentary Labour Party is to continue and uphold the renewal of the Trident nuclear missile submarine fleet together with the relevant multi-warhead missiles. Taking that as given, what are we to make of Jeremy Corbyn's calls for the complete removal of submarine-launched ballistic nuclear missiles from our defence establishment? Do you agree with Jeremy Corbyn or with the party?
I don't really think Jeremy is at odds with the party. I mean, we have known for many years what Jeremy's views are on nuclear disarmament. He has said that he will abide by the agreed policy of the Labour Party. I think most of us want to agree with the policy of the Labour Party and have backed it for many years. I'm very clear, I've always been a multilateral nuclear disarmer, not unilateral. A lot of us in the PLP hold that similar view. So, and Jeremy accepts that.
Roberta, what steps would you take, or would you advise the government or Assembly ministers to take in order to bring back the Northern Ireland Assembly into full operation?
I think it's a really, really, really difficult issue. But at the end of the day, the Assembly members in Northern Ireland were elected to do a job, and that job is to manage key services in Northern Ireland, and I think they have to constantly be reminded about the importance of democracy and fulfilling their role. My own view, though it might not be accepted by everyone, is that they should not be able to draw a salary when they're not sitting, except for the constituency elements that they're continuing to do. But really, I'd rather we didn't go down that road. I'd rather they were kind of put in a room and made to come up with some sort of solution, and really required to do that by the government, because I think they're not serving the people of Northern Ireland well.
Roberta, In what used to be termed the good old days, the legend was that general election votes here in the northeast used to be weighed, not counted. Your last candidacy resulted in a win again for you, with an increase in your majority. But the Tory candidates also picked up votes, albeit less a percentage in yourself. My question is, do you feel threatened by the steady rise of opposition in your city constituency?
Well, it's not been a steady rise in opposition for me because it's a change in opposition. So at one stage the Liberal Democrats were much closer to us than the Tories are now, and of course the real casualty over the last few years has been the Liberal Democrats, because their votes, interestingly, have gone largely to the Tories. And so I'm now dealing with a split opposition, Liberal Democrats, Tories, UKIP to a degree, and the Greens. And I'm just pleased that Labour have really increased their votes and their vote share in this constituency, and that's partly down to a really good constituency Labour Party and very, very hard-working activists.
Roberta, what would be your comments or reply, if any, to Guardian columnist Paul Mason's confirmation that he would like to see compulsory re-selections for all Labour MPs, adding, "I want to have it hanging over every MP's head that they could get deselected if they don't do their jobs properly"?
Well, all Labour candidates go through a selection or reselection process, so I think my comment is I'm not quite sure what it is he's referring to. It's my view that we all go through a selection and a reselection process each time we stand to be a candidate, and obviously in the interests of party democracy and transparency and accountability that should continue.
What would you say to a proposal that each political party states as an election manifesto promise that it will categorically place their plans for spending on a sealed website, and then ask the British population if they would approve such yearly spending plans? The plans being asked for on a sealed electoral referendum type site.
I think whenever people vote for a political party at a general election, they have to know what they're voting for, and they have to have a broad idea of where that party is going in terms of public expenditure and its overall taxation policy, and that once that's happened and once that government's put in place, what they need to do is get their proposals through Parliament, because that's the system we have. We're a parliamentary democracy, and providing parties have been clear and transparent about what they're going to do in terms of spending, then once they win an election, I think what they do is they put those proposals to Parliament. They have to do that on an annual basis, and the Parliament takes the vote.
Should there be term limits in Parliament, in the House of Commons, with a maximum of 2 or maybe 3 parliamentary 5-year terms for all MPs? And should there also be a clean out in the Lords of a similar nature?
I think there's general agreement that there are too many people in the House of Lords and that we need reform of the House of Lords, and I understand that the government are working on another set of proposals, so we will consider that probably sometime in this Parliament. For members of Parliament, if they already go through a selection and reselection process and their local party and their local community wants them to stand again, then I think that should be a voice of the people and not some arbitrary deadline come down. Because the other thing, of course, is you want parliamentarians who are very experienced, because they have real use in terms of knowing the parliamentary system. So you need a mix of people in Parliament. So I think providing there's something that ensures people have to go through a reselection system, then that should be, if you like, the gatekeeping is at that level and not having an arbitrary date set.
Would you support a recall policy if such was proposed for Parliament. I mean, no one is perfect, and if an MP is found to be at fault, either criminally, financially or morally, surely we, the constituency electorate, should be able to state, hang about, things have changed, you've been found guilty of whatever, and we reckon you should resign, or what's the term, apply for the Chiltern Hundreds and run again in the knowledge of your acts.
I think it very much depends what the nature of the recall policy is, so I'm not against having a recall policy, but if a Member of Parliament was found to have done something criminally wrong and is in prison, they would no longer be able to be the MP in any case. But if there was clearly set out rules, so it's clear what sort of breach it is that we're talking about and what sort of level, then, and MPs understand that before they stand for the job, then I think that's acceptable. But just having a witch hunt is not acceptable.
If you were in power, the Labour Party were in power, in government, what alterations would you make to immigrant policies from outside the EU when the Brexit process is completed?
I think we'll do pretty much as the system is already, and the system that Labour put in place, which is a points-based policy that allows you to adjust immigration and who's coming in on the particular skills that are needed in the country at any one time. It's a system that works pretty well across a whole range of countries, and we might want to tweak it, of course, but the overall, if you like, underpinning idea behind the general immigration policy is that we want people with the skills that we need to come here, and we'll adjust the system to allow for that.
Do you agree with the abortion laws as existing these days in England, Scotland and Wales? If you do not, how would you propose to amend them?
I agree with the abortion laws, and it isn't something that I think we would want to change. I think my record in Parliament on these issues speaks for itself, and we reduced the limit for abortions to 24 weeks. Except for where the mother's life is threatened or there is severe disability detected some years ago. There have been some attempts to revisit since then, but they have not got through Parliament, and I have supported the system staying as it is. The only change I would make is to decriminalise the system, because doctors are still, I mean, it doesn't happen in practice very much, but theoretically they could be under threat of criminal action, and I think I would want to ensure that that's not the case.
Roberta, are you in favour of a conscience clause in equality and discriminatory law legislation? For instance, in Ashers, Cakes and Bakers in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, I think that should be looked at to see whether it's feasible to implement it in practice and in what circumstances it would be feasible, but I'm not against that being looked at.
Roberta, a French philosopher once said, "There go my people. I must find out where they are going so I can lead them." You may deprecate the actions of Myanmar's military, but can you perhaps understand that the Muslim Rohingyas have been a thorn in the majority Buddhist side for years, with militant Muslim Rohingya activity hitting police stations and villages alike, and as Buddhists read the news available just the same as the rest of the world does? They must be aware that militant Islam is on the march in many corners, and they applaud the military in their determination that Islam, radical, militant, either or both, would not be allowed to turn their Myanmar into an imitation of the Islamic Caliphate.
I do think I have a fairly rounded understanding of the situation about the Rohingya people, and I have met with members of the Myanmar government, particularly their ambassador in London, to discuss through the issues. However, I think for any government it has to be able to separate out what might be legitimate action that is taken against terrorists and action that is taken against its own people. And the underlying problem with the Rohingya is that they have not got citizenship. And you know, what's going to have to happen from the international community with Myanmar and Bangladesh on board is that they sort out how to give the Rohingya people citizenship and give them a stake in a country. And that's what hasn't happened, and that's what needs to happen, as otherwise this is going to continue to be an ongoing problem. But it's a problem that could have a solution. And I think everybody understands that there is, in all countries, a problem with, or there could be a problem with Islamic extremism, and that that will have to be dealt with, but that's not quite the situation that's there at the moment, in my opinion.
Roberta, as both a Labour MP and a shadow frontbench spokesman, what are your views on the Momentum movement, in view of the fact that Neil Kinnock spent a great deal of political influence ridding Labour of the hardline left, and here they are ruling the roost alongside Jeremy Corbyn?
I can only go from my personal experience of Momentum in my own constituency, and they are a very, very hard-working group of Labour activists. They are a very mixed group. They contain, you know, a lot of young people. That energy brings a lot to the Labour Party, and it brought a lot in the last election. And you know, I think what we have to do is consider Momentum as part of the big Labour Party mix. We're a very broad family within the Labour Party, and we have to be able to have good debate amongst us. It leads to better policy making. So I can only go from my own experience, and that's what I've experienced in Durham.
Roberta, what is your comment on the likely possibility of the Labour Party doing a complete U-turn and voting in the House of Commons to remain in the European Union's custom union, as profiled by your colleague Emily Thornberry and as also featured in Alt News Media's headlines?
I think where we are at the moment is that Labour wants to see what sort of deal the government is going to come up with. Keir Starmer has been very clear at setting lines for the Labour Party. We obviously think it's in the interests of particularly manufacturing in this country that we keep something as close to the customs union as possible. So I suspect Labour won't make a hard decision until they have a pretty good idea what it is the government's likely to come up with. But we'll keep that sitting as something that we will return to and discuss as the negotiations go on.
Roberta, my final query is regarding the organ donor system. As an MP, what are your views on the proposed change in the organ donor scheme, where the present standard protocol is only to secure donor organs from those who have opted in to the scheme? The government is proposing to alter the scheme to be an opt-out, where people who do not believe that the state owns their bodies after death have to sign up to remove themselves from that same scheme. Your comments, if any. Thank you.
I'm in favour of what the government's proposing, because I think people should have to opt out if they really don't want their organs to be used. And we know there's a huge shortage of donor organs that, you know, could give life to somebody else or help somebody else, and providing there's an opt-out scheme and everybody understands that there is an opt-out scheme. quite happy with what the government's proposing.